This is a piece of racing history here in Daytona Beach. The last part of famed NASCAR mechanic Smokey Yunick's garage was gutted by fire tonight and is being called suspicious.
What if most people thought they knew the story of Smokey Yunick? They remember the man who argued with NASCAR officials, built some of the fastest race cars ever seen, and became famous for always finding a smarter way to win. But after Smokey died in 2001, the doors of his legendary Florida garage told a very different story. Inside were forgotten race cars, one-of-a-kind engines, shelves packed with handwritten notes, and decades of ideas that seemed far ahead of their time. It wasn't just a workshop. It was the mind of a genius, frozen in time. Imagine opening a building that had shaped some of the greatest moments in American racing. Every corner held another mystery. Every dusty shelf hinted at an invention the world had almost forgotten. For racing fans, it felt like stepping into a hidden museum that no one else had ever truly seen. Before we go deeper, here's a question for you. Do you think breaking the rules is ever acceptable if it leads to innovation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. To understand why the garage shocked so many people, you first have to understand the man who built it. Henry Smokey Yunick was never interested in doing things the easy way. If everyone built an engine one way, Smokey wanted to know why. If a rule said something couldn't be done, he looked carefully to see what the rule didn't say. That way of thinking made him one of the most respected and most controversial figures in racing history. His garage in Daytona Beach, Florida, wasn't a normal repair shop. It became a place where impossible ideas turned into real machines. Mechanics, drivers, and engineers came through its doors hoping to learn something new. Many left amazed by what they had seen. Others left wondering how one man could think so differently from everyone else. According to interviews with people who knew Smokey, along with his autobiography Best Damn Garage in Town and years of reporting by respected motorsports historians, the garage was filled with custom-built tools, experimental parts, engineering sketches, and racing technology that often appeared years before similar ideas became common. It reflected a lifetime spent chasing speed, not fame. But as remarkable as those discoveries were, they only hinted at a much bigger story. Because the fearless attitude that made Smokey a legend didn't begin inside that garage. It began years earlier, during one of the most dangerous times in modern history. And that journey would shape everything that came next. Long before people called him a racing genius, Smokey Yunick learned a lesson that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Life was short. If you wanted to do something great, you had to be brave enough to try it. That belief followed him everywhere, and it all started during World War II. Born in 1923 in Pennsylvania, Henry Smokey Yunick grew up during hard times. His family didn't have much money, so he learned early how to fix things instead of replacing them. While other kids played, Smokey was taking apart engines just to see how they worked. He wasn't happy with simple answers. He wanted to know why machines behaved the way they did. That curiosity would later make him one of the greatest innovators in motorsports. Then the world changed. When the United States entered World War II, Smokey joined the Army Air Forces. He became a B-17 bomber pilot and flew dangerous combat missions over Europe. Every flight carried real danger. One mistake could mean the end. Those experiences taught him to stay calm under pressure, solve problems quickly, and trust his instincts when everything was on the line. That fearless mindset never left him. After returning home, Smokey wasn't interested in living an ordinary life. America was falling in love with fast cars, and racing was growing quickly. While many people saw racing as entertainment, Smokey saw it as the perfect place to test ideas that no one else had dared to try. He opened a garage in Daytona Beach, Florida. At first, it looked like any other repair shop. But inside, something special was happening. Smokey wasn't just fixing cars. He was redesigning them from the ground up. Every engine, every suspension part, every tiny detail became an experiment. Soon, word spread. Drivers wanted Smokey to build their cars because they knew he could make them faster. Other mechanics visited just to watch him work. Some left inspired. Others left wondering how he kept finding speed where nobody else could. But success also brought attention. The faster Smokey's cars became, the more NASCAR officials began watching him. They knew he had an incredible mind, but they also suspected he was finding clever ways around the rules. Smokey loved that challenge. He often said that racing wasn't just about driving. It was about thinking better than everyone else. According to his autobiography, Best Damn Garage in Town, and interviews collected by motorsports historians, Smokey believed the rulebook should be read carefully because it only prohibited what was actually written. If the rules didn't forbid an idea, he believed it was fair game. That philosophy would soon lead to some of the most famous stories in NASCAR history. Cars became faster. Championships followed. Rival teams grew frustrated. Officials prepared for closer inspections. And before long, one inspection would become so legendary that racing fans are still talking about it decades later. But what happened next changed Smokey Yunick's reputation forever. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Smokey Yunick wasn't just winning races. He was changing the way people thought about racing itself. While other teams focused on horsepower alone, Smokey looked at every single part of the car and asked one simple question: can this be better? That question made him one of the most successful mechanics in NASCAR history. Working with legendary drivers like Fireball Roberts, Smokey helped win some of the sport's biggest races, including multiple victories at the Daytona 500. His cars were known for being fast, reliable, and incredibly well-engineered. Rivals respected his talent, even when they couldn't stand losing to him. But Smokey didn't see rules the same way everyone else did. He believed the rulebook wasn't there to stop creativity. It was there to define limits. If a rule didn't clearly ban something, then, in his mind, it was legal. That way of thinking led to some of the most famous stories in NASCAR history. One of the best-known tales involved NASCAR inspectors handing Smokey a long list of violations after inspecting one of his race cars. The story, repeated in his autobiography and by many racing historians, says officials found so many issues that they removed the fuel tank before telling him the car couldn't race. Smokey reportedly smiled, climbed into the car, started the engine, and drove away without the fuel tank. The point wasn't that the car could race forever without it. Engineers have long explained that fuel remaining in the fuel lines could allow an engine to run briefly. The story became legendary because it perfectly captured Smokey's personality. Even when officials thought they had beaten him, he found one last way to surprise them. That wasn't the only reason people called him a genius. He experimented with airflow long before aerodynamics became a major focus. He studied cooling systems, suspension geometry, engine efficiency, and weight distribution in ways that many larger teams ignored. Some of his ideas seemed strange at first, but years later they became standard engineering practices across motorsports. His workshop became a place where impossible ideas came to life. Young mechanics walked through the garage and saw engines taken apart in ways they had never imagined. Custom tools filled the walls. Hand-built parts sat beside detailed notebooks packed with measurements, sketches, and observations from countless hours of testing. According to former employees and racing historians, Smokey believed every failure taught him something valuable, and every experiment brought him one step closer to perfection. But with every clever innovation came another argument with NASCAR. Officials tightened the rules. Smokey searched for another loophole. The sport evolved because of that constant battle. In many ways, NASCAR wasn't just racing against other teams. It was racing against Smokey's imagination. But what happened next almost destroyed everything. Before we reveal the controversies that followed and what was eventually discovered inside his famous garage, make sure you subscribe. We uncover the untold stories behind legendary figures that most people have never heard. The battles between Smokey and NASCAR would only grow more intense. Some people called him a cheater. Others called him the greatest engineer the sport had ever seen. The truth was far more complicated, and the discoveries waiting inside his garage after his death would make that debate even bigger. When Smokey Yunick passed away in 2001, many people expected his famous garage to hold old race cars and worn-out tools. They were right, but only partly. What they didn't expect was to find a lifetime of ideas that showed just how far ahead of his time he had been. As people carefully looked through the building, they found shelves packed with handmade engine parts, custom tools that existed nowhere else, notebooks filled with engineering sketches, and race cars that still carried Smokey's unique touch. Every room seemed to answer one question while creating two new ones. It quickly became clear that this wasn't just a mechanic's shop. It was the workshop of someone who never stopped learning. Friends, former employees, and racing historians have described the garage as a living record of Smokey's mind. Every notebook contained observations from countless hours of testing. Every modified part told the story of another experiment. Even projects that were never finished showed how he constantly searched for better solutions instead of accepting the way things had always been done. That mindset made him different from almost everyone else. Long before modern computers became common in racing, Smokey relied on careful measurements, experience, and endless testing. He didn't guess. He experimented. If one design failed, he changed it. If another worked, he asked how it could become even better. Some visitors were amazed by the collection of rare race cars connected to NASCAR's early years. Others couldn't stop looking at the engines. Many of them included custom-built pieces that reflected Smokey's belief that every part of an engine could be improved. His garage also preserved decades of racing history. Old photographs, technical drawings, trophies, letters, and personal memorabilia helped paint a picture of a man who lived and breathed motorsports every single day. According to motorsports historians and accounts from people who visited the shop, walking through the garage felt like stepping back into one of NASCAR's most creative eras. But perhaps the most surprising discovery wasn't a single engine or race car. It was the realization that Smokey's greatest invention had always been his way of thinking. He questioned everything. He refused to accept easy answers. And he believed there was always a smarter way.